Let's now see whether we can connect with DA member as well as the City of Cape Town's Mayor, Patricia de Lille, who has been fighting this matter since she was in the previous party, the PAC. I hope she can join us now. Mayor Patricia de Lille, can you hear me? It's Aldrin Simpier. We're coming live to you from Auckland Park. It has been 9 years since the NPA took the decision to drop the charges. What do you make of this decision now that eventually it's happening, that the former President Jacob Zuma, is now appearing in the Durban High Court to face these charges?
Yes, it is also almost 20 years ago, on the 9th of September 1999, when I went to Parliament and asked for an investigation into the arms deal. And President Zuma, or former President Zuma, has always said that he would like to have his day in court, and the day has finally arrived. Although very late, because I think South Africans, we wanted to see an earlier prosecution, and we could have saved South Africa a lot of money, because we wasted millions of rands on the Sariti Commission. The Sariti Commission had the predetermined outcome that there's no evidence. We all went there, Terry Crawford Brown, myself, Feinstein, all of us. And in the end, they simply just said there's no evidence. So now, for the first time, in an open court of law, Jacob Zuma will be able to state his side of the case.
I guess the other thing about the Sariti Commission is that how many have asked the question that how was it possible for the former ANC chief whip in Parliament, Tony Ngeni, to be found guilty on charges of on charges relating to corruption, but on the other hand, you find that the Sariti Commission itself didn't find any wrongdoing in the Arms Deal Commission.
That is exactly the point. You know, what was then dubbed the De Lille dossier contained a lot of allegations of corruption against many people in South Africa. Out of that De Lille document or dossier, Tony Ngeni was found guilty, Shabir Sheikh was found guilty, and now, of course, in terms of the same document, Jacob Zuma is appearing before a court of law. In terms of people that have received discounted cars from the arms supplier, there are many more, at least 29 more, who were never charged, who were never prosecuted. And so in a way, if you look at, you know, Tony Ngeni, Shabir Sheikh, Jacob Zuma now, you know, the four guys, but there were many more behind this. And that is why I've always asked and insisted that all the allegations contained in the De Lille dossier must be investigated.
There had been obviously a resistance at the time when you came up with the De Lille dossier. And I wonder, though, so many years later, why the ANC seems to be playing along. Because at some point they were resisting this investigation into the Arms Deal Commission, rather into the Arms Deal inquiry.
Yes, sometimes, you know, especially now that they've charged Jacob Zuma, just go back and read some of the debates in Parliament in Hansard. You know, the report where they had a public protector, the Auditor General, all of the three Chapter 9 institutions also did an investigation. And, you know, you look at all the sanitized versions that were presented during those years so as not to admit that, in fact, there was corruption during the arms deal. So hopefully now we will be able to look even past Jacob Zuma and start looking at prosecuting the other people that were alleged to be involved. Some of them got away with millions. And we must do something to recover some of that stolen money that belongs to the taxpayers of South Africa.
At the time of compiling this dossier, when you handed over this dossier, you yourself faced death threats.
Oh, yes, you know, I always question why me, why did people choose me to give the information to. But soon after that day in September of 1999, I really became very isolated. You know, I was called names. I think the worst for me when I was called unpatriotic. And when in fact, you know, I was really just trying to assist government to root out the bad apples, the corrupt ones within government. And when I got the death threats, at least, you know, there were a group of us together that, including Judge Willem Heath, Feinstein, where we could come, and Gavin Woods also, you know, we always used to come together as that group and work together to get us through those difficult times. It was only until the September 2001 when the Auditor General indeed confirmed that there were some allegations of corruption, people didn't follow due process, that we sort of turned the corner. But before that, it was really 2 years of hell.
Well, what you're seeing now on your screens are live visuals of the former president, President Jacob Zuma, sitting there in the Durban High Court, where he is to face the 16 charges that are on the 18-charge indictment. As it has been indicated that President Jacob Zuma, the former president, has made some representations to the NPA, but the NPA insisting that despite those representations that have been made, which also includes issues around whether the former president, whether there has been political meddling in the former president's prosecution or attempts to prosecute him, whether there was merits to it, and the Sean Abrams, the man who was appointed by Jacob Zuma about 3 years ago to lead that institution, then said that despite these representations that you've given us, we are going ahead and we will charge you. You will be facing 16 charges. I think the lady there sitting next to him is a representative of the Tint company. Remember, the Tint is also a co-accused in this matter, and that's the reason that you have her sitting there. She will be representing Tint being a co-accused in this matter. Mayor Patricia de Lille, just quickly as well, if we still have you on the line, where do you see this matter end? Do you think that there will be some sort of finality close by, considering that President Jacob Zuma, the former president, has always taken on the Stalingrad approach? You fight in every corner, you fight in every street, you fight in every house, you fight in every room.
I think that the victory for South Africa, what we are displaying here today, is that we are all equal before the law. It doesn't matter where you are president or whoever, that we subject to the laws and the constitution of this country. And that also, for those corrupt people who are still stealing from government today, who are stealing from the poor, it's sending out a strong message that you will be caught one day and you will be charged and you will be sent to jail, because we are trying to deal with the scourge of corruption. And this is where the trial of Jacob Zuma is going to assist us in the country to build that culture that corruption is not acceptable.
The trial is something else, because this is the point that President Jacob Zuma, or former President Jacob Zuma, and his council has already indicated that they are going to challenge this decision by the NPA to reinstate the charges. So there is another cycle coming up, and that's the cycle of challenging this decision. So we're going to go to a high court, we're going to go to the Supreme Court, and possibly to the Constitutional Court again. So it's the same thing over and over again.
Well, you know what? I think the difference this time around is that as the taxpayers of South Africa, we footed the legal bill. We paid for everything. This time around, if this case needs to be dragged out again, going through it, of course, it's also the right of Jacob Zuma to follow all the options open to him. But this time around, he will have to pay out of his pocket. And as the taxpayers, we are not going to be billed for those legal bills.
Actually, that doesn't seem to be the case, because remember, it was your own party that asked questions to the President Cyril Ramaphosa, about President Jacob Zuma's legal bills. And he said, according to the agreement that has been signed between former President Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma, it says that the former president, now former President Jacob Zuma's legal costs will be covered by the state attorney, because at the time of these allegations, he was still an MEC in KwaZulu-Natal.
I think there is a qualification to that agreement, and that is that if he is found guilty, then he must repay all of that money. But even the legality of the actual agreement is in question now, whether in fact legislation makes provision for that kind of agreement. And so if he's found guilty, he has to repay the money of the taxpayers.
Patricia de Lille, just like you to stand by quickly. I just quickly want to bring in a political analyst, Susan Boyson, who's also joining us in studio, speaking about the issue around footing former President Jacob Zuma's bill. This has been a huge issue. Of course, the DA is now challenging this in court. Where do you see this end?
Yes, you know, unless this little golden tap of free supply of state funds for legal defences and often frivolous postponements, applications for review, unless that little tap is closed off, we can be in for another good decade of legal proceedings and court cases around Jacob Zuma being drawn out. And some people have also suggested that the finality on who pays and to what extent might be one of the big issues on which the Zuma's team in court today, in this historical scene that we see now with Zuma having his day in court, even if it could be a few minutes, unless we get finality of that. And that can be one of the reasons why the Zuma team could be requesting for a postponement and we'll see a further delay in these proceedings.
What impact do you think, if any, does it then create a dent in brand ANC if the current president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, continues to foot the bill of the former president, considering that the NEC has already taken a decision that let's distance ourselves and let's not be seen to be endorsing this and former President Jacob Zuma as he faces these corruption charges?
Yes, given how long these proceedings and sequences of court cases can still be drawn out, I think Cyril Ramaphosa and the so-called new ANC has got no choice but to put a clearer differentiation between their efforts to promote clean governance, eliminate corruption, and just continuously, freely supplying these funds for legal defences, because we know when the day comes when Zuma has to possibly repay, he could very well plead poverty.
Still continuing with the rolling coverage of former President Jacob Zuma's court appearance. It is his first court appearance in about 9 years. Since the charges have been dropped against him. Of course, as we indicated, it has been a Stalingrad approach. You fight in every corner, you fight in every street, as his counsel, Kemp J. Kemp, once said. Patricia de Lille, let me just quickly bring you in here. The NPA is indicating that it has about 207 witnesses on its witness list. But the strange thing for me is that when you look at the Schabir Shaik case, there was someone on the Schabir Shaik case who was a key witness, and that person is Zwelim Kize, who's now the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. And one of the strange things that I find is that why isn't he on this 207 list of witnesses? What do you make of this?
Well, I've seen that only this morning that they've announced who's going to lead the prosecution, Billy Downer. And I'm sure he was also the lead prosecutor in the Schabir Shaik case in Durban. And hopefully with him leading that, whoever drew up the list of witnesses, I'm sure that Mr. Billy Downer will make sure that if Mr. Mkhize is needed in the trial, that he does come out and give his evidence to. I think it's early days. Like you said earlier on, we might be spending more time now to question whether it was legal or not to reinstate the charges before we actually get to the real substantive issues.
Yeah, and of course, at the time, the prosecution did say or make the argument in the Schabir Shaik case that there was a generally corrupt relationship between Jacob Zuma and Schabir Shaik.
Yes, certainly Judge Squires at the time came to that conclusion. And the one thing that happened in Schabir Shaik's case was that he then went on after the Durban High Court to go to the Supreme Court of Appeal, where he also lost From there, he proceeded to go to the Constitutional Court, where he also lost. So the Constitutional Court, being the highest court in the land, and having found him guilty on those charges, I'm almost certain that when these charges are tested against Jacob Zuma, that the charges will also stick to him.
Okay,
and
unfortunately,
just think the law must take its course.
We have to cut you there. The court is in session. It's all rise, and there is the judge. Let's listen in.